On behalf of the National Gang Center and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, I would like to welcome you all to the Interrupting the Cycle of Youth Violence, What Does It Mean to Be Credible webinar. As a reminder, as we get started, the opinions, findings, and conclusions of the moderator, presenters, and our panelists are their own. The National Gang Center serves to assist youth and family-focused practitioners, justice agencies, and all community stakeholders to navigate the extensive range of research and community-informed practices that address gang violence and its consequences. The center provides information, tools, and technical assistance to support communities as they develop sustainable solutions to prevent and reduce street gang violence. For more information about the Gang Center who is bringing you this webinar today, we recommend visiting our website or contacting us directly. So as we get started, I would like to welcome Mina Harris, the Director of the National Gang Center and Executive Vice President of the Institute for Intergovernmental Research, to provide opening remarks. Welcome, Mina.
Thank you, Sterling. So, interrupting the cycle of violence from a community-based model which invests in youth and families requires the coordination of sufficient resources, collaboration among multiple sectors, and a dedication to effecting positive change through methods that are not patronizing or paternalistic, but instead through credible practices that engage youth, their families, front and center to advancing positive change for them and their communities. As a federal resource for the nation, OJJDP's National Gang Center is not about some narrow perception of criminalization of young people involved in gangs. Accountability does matter. There are ways to hold youth accountable that do not always involve incarceration. The center works to break down myths about youth impacted by gangs, which are also sometimes referred to as groups or street organizations, cliques, or crews. This center is the source to provide communities with sustainable solutions for increasing their capacities to address violent gang activity in their communities while simultaneously advancing priorities for youth justice. In part, this leads us to the topic of credibility. The words credible and credibility are terms that are being used more often as we as a nation are seeking ways to transform the justice system. Excuse me. Credibility is essential at all levels of operation and implementation to address the violence that is devastating certain segments of our youth population. But what do these words really mean? How do any of us engage with each other and those we serve in this work from a credible position? Respect, trustworthiness, reliability, and consistency are all characteristics of credibility that apply to partner agencies and individual professionals. Credibility is critical to building impactful, trustworthy relationships. Building credibility involves authentic individuals whose experiences enhance their connection to youth, their families, and the community. For individuals in these roles, despite their compassion and dedication, credibility is not a given. It must be demonstrated. This takes personal commitment and strong internal and external support structures. When successful individuals in these roles are a key to transformational change in improving public safety and uplifting the lives of youth impacted by community violence. So with today's webinar, we want to explore the topic of credibility. To meet the webinar objectives you see on the screen, we've invited 3 guests from the field. We will begin with some discussion recognizing the broad landscape and importance of the work of youth violence intervention professionals. We will follow with a panel discussion to hear from our guests as they have leveraged their own lived experiences in facilitating transformative change in their communities. Throughout the presentation and discussion, we want you to gain some insight into strategies for strengthening and sustaining credibility with youth, their families, their communities, and other partners. So let's begin with our moderator and presenter, Tracy Swan. Since April 2021, Tracy Swan has served as a public safety reform strategist in Cumberland County, New Jersey. She works to help the county reimagine public safety through a broader public health lens. Tracy leads the gang and violence reduction initiatives in the office, as well as its positive youth development efforts, and will now also be leading its newly funded mental health diversion program. Tracy spent the previous 17 years at the Rand Institute for Public Affairs at Rutgers University, Camden, New Jersey, where she last led the Strategic Initiatives Department. She managed a diverse portfolio of projects, including program evaluations, needs assessment, and technical assistance and capacity building initiatives. As a result of her assistance on the Positive Youth Development Coalition in Cumberland County, juvenile arrests were decreased by 56.5% from 2012 to 2019. Tracy holds a master's degree in public administration and criminal justice. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you so much, Nina. And I welcome everyone who is attending this webinar today. So we're going to start with, why should we value youth violence intervention? Why is it important to prevent and reduce youth violence? And I have three specific responses to that. First of all, we all know who's been doing this work, that responses of the past, like swift and long incarceration periods for juveniles, or when we've utilized outside experts and service providers outside of our own communities, that those responses have been very expensive and largely unsuccessful in transforming youth lives. So for example, in New Jersey, about 77% of juveniles released from state facilities are arrested again. That's pretty high. That's more than 3/4. And 25% are reincarcerated within 3 years of release. And OJJDP, as part of their News at a Glance, they shared a review of state studies that found that rearrest rates for youth within 1 year of release, and I assume this is across the country. So rearrest rates for youth within 1 year of release averaged 55%, and reincarceration or reconfinement averaged 24%. So just from those statistics alone, we know that what we have been doing hasn't been the most successful. Also in New Jersey, the state spends about $445,000 per youth per year to house a youth in one of their facilities. And I'm sure many of you on this webinar today would say, give me $445,000 and I can do a lot with that can prevent and intervene with youth violence. My second response to why we should value youth violence intervention is because it saves lives. It saves lives of those perpetrating violence and lives in the community who fall victim to violence. And thirdly, it can save money by shifting funding or spending less on preventative programs than what we spend on incarceration and those types of programs. And we know that prevention programs can cost up to 7 times less than incarceration. So why not shift some of those dollars from that end of the justice system to the front end of the justice system? An evaluation of Cure Violence, which operates in 25 US cities and 15 countries, found that every dollar spent in that program reduced medical and criminal justice costs by nearly $16. So you're getting $16 worth of savings for every dollar that you spend on that prevention intervention program. So there are several different models of addressing, intervening to prevent and reduce youth violence, particularly gang and gun violence. And as people are kind of registering in the chat who they are, where they're from, they're listing some of the names of those programs. And we can even see by that the wealth of names of programs and agencies. And so all of these different models have different names, and they might have a little bit slightly different approaches. and they have different staff roles. But regardless of what programs call themselves, they all have similar goals. And those goals are they care about youth and they want to reduce youth violence. They want to see youth succeed and they want to protect youth from being a victim of violence. And all of these programs and staff that are part of these programs must have credibility in order to be successful. And this slide and the next two slides provides examples of the different staff roles in some of these models. So this one, we have credible messengers. And credible messengers, generally speaking, are mentors who have passed through the justice system and sustainably have transformed their own lives. And then they're able to break through to younger justice involved people. And I would also say youth who aren't justice involved, but maybe are on the path to be justice involved. And they're able to form powerful, transformative personal relationships with these youth. So these are the credible messengers. Next, we have street outreach workers. And generally speaking, these are community-based professionals who build relationships with gang-involved youth to assist in and meet the needs while they're educating them about and encouraging them to disrupt violence and criminal activity. And then lastly, we have the violence interrupters. These individuals help prevent shootings by identifying and mediating potentially lethal conflicts in the target areas that they're working in. And they also follow up to ensure that the conflict doesn't reignite. Interrupters and other staff work separate from law enforcement. It's very important to have that bright line separating these type of staff with law enforcement. And they must remain independent in order to maintain the credibility that is needed to do the work with those youth and young adults who are at highest risk for violence. So sometimes in the various models, we have staff who perform a combination of these roles. They might do a little credible messaging, they might do a little bit of street outreach, and they might also do violence interruption. Or some programs have staff that are completely separate and they only do violence interruption, or they only do street outreach, or they only do credible messenger functions. But regardless of how it's set up in the model, in the program, again, they all want to see youth succeed and they all want to reduce violence. So none of this can be achieved without credibility. And you need credibility with those that you're serving, so the youth, young adults, and their families. You need credibility in the communities that are impacted, not only by your services, but by the violence that's going on in that community. And you need credibility with other organizations, agencies, and services that you might want to refer your participants to help them succeed. And you also need credibility with law enforcement. And credibility is what engenders trust. It's what helps to create that trust, which is absolutely paramount to build positive connections with youth and young adults. And once you have that trust that you've built and that positive connection with youth, then that can turn into helping build respect of youth and families, being able to act as a mentor with these youth and young adults, being able to successfully connect the youth, young adult participants in your program to the available resources in your community, to be able to be a credible advocate for the needs of your participants with the various other agencies, especially mainstream agencies, and I would even say government, public sector agencies in the community. And it also helps to provide the alternatives and a replacement that is positive to gang activity. So it is the credibility that allows the youth and young adults that you're working with to listen to the staff and engage with them, true engagement, partnering with them to be successful. And it is that credibility that can lead to the transformation of youth lives and to peace in your community. So these staff are able to engage in crisis response, gang mediation. They're able to assist youth through gang-related and real life situations, things that are happening to them in real time. How do I navigate this? How do I move through this and making healthy decisions? It also helps us provide intervention and case management services to our participants. We can help guide youth to a place of success, whatever their goals may be. And we're able to work in our communities where the gangs actually operate. Let's see if I can move the slide forward. Yes. So how is this all achieved? Well, we have a few points that we want to make in terms of how you create, build, and maintain credibility. So the first is model behavior. So staff in the various youth violence intervention programs need to model the positive behavior and relationships in their own lives for the youth to witness. And this is why it's so important that programs, in my opinion, have criteria for the types of staff that they're willing to hire. You can't really preach peace or put down your guns or leave the gang lifestyle or whatever it is that you're preaching to reduce violence if you have staff or you yourself still have one foot in that world. Or even if you've left that world behind and you're doing this work, but you catch a domestic violence charge, or you post pics on social media of your family or your kids stacking gang signs, that's not modeling the behavior that you want your youth and young adult participants to take note of and follow. You also need to build relationships. And so you need really well-crafted relationship building skills. Most staff that are a part of these community violence intervention programs, they already have their pulse on what is going on in the neighborhoods, in their communities, and what youth in those neighborhoods face, because primarily they've lived in those neighborhoods, or they might even live in those neighborhoods today as they're doing this work. And they face the same challenges that the youth and young adults that they're trying to serve have faced. And these experiences of the staff person help build relationships with the youth, young adults, because they see that staff is credible because they get it, because they've been there, they've gone through it. And so because of that, staff really end up being mentors. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but staff really end up being mentors to the youth, young adults that are a part of the programs, because they're able to walk side by side with the youth and young adults because they've been there. At the same time that it's important to build relationship skill, build a relationship with your participants, it's just as important to keep building strong and positive relationships. It's not done once you feel that that relationship has been formed. You need to continue to be credible and to continue to build and enhance that relationship. Not all youth are going to necessarily stay 100% engaged 100% of the time when they're a part of your program or attached to your program in some way. And they might not always get involved right from the onset. So staff need to keep the relationships with youth and young adults open so that those who drift away have a place to come back to, a trusted, safe place to come back to when they're ready to re-engage again. And that is an excellent segue into another thing that needs to happen for building and keeping credibility, and that is consistent follow through. My motto is always under promise and over deliver. So it's super important that staff don't promise something to a youth or young adult that they know they're not going to be able to deliver either at all or by the time frame that they're suggesting that they can deliver it in. Or even if they think this is going to be a really difficult one to make happen. And so, you know, edge your bets a little bit and give yourself some time and inform the youth and young adults that, you know, this one might be a tough one, but let me try, let me work on it, let me see, and keep that person updated as to whatever it is that you're working on for them. Be honest with your participants and be there for them. We also have the importance of professionalism. So specifically with this slide, I'm going to be talking about boundaries. So it's really important for staff to maintain boundaries. And it could be boundaries with their participants that they're working with, boundaries with law enforcement, boundaries with families, the community at large, even the other agencies that they are partnering with to bring about services and change with the youth and young adults. So staff need to be crystal clear with their participants, the youth, young adults that they are serving about the boundaries of the relationship. And it's important to do that upfront, or, you know, pretty close to upfront. You need to make sure these boundaries can be from making sure that youth know, don't share specifics with me about criminal activities or things that you may know, because I might need to do something with that. So it's best, don't share specifics. 2, staff literally not engaging in an intimate or inappropriate relationship with a youth, young adult participant. So think about these boundaries. Should there be opposite gender pairings of youth and staff? A male who's assigned to work with a young female, vice versa? What about a male staff giving a female youth a ride home? Should we have those things? These are important boundaries to think about in your programs and as you're developing the programs. What about, should staff, because they're very passionate about what they're doing, hey, I want to be able to help this youth get a little bit of pocket money, so I'm going to employ this youth to do some chores around my house, mow the lawn, wash my car, clean my house, whatever it may be. What kind of boundary is that setting? We all know that there also needs to be boundaries between staff and law enforcement. And both staff and law enforcement need to know what those boundaries are, and they need to agree on them. Law enforcement and these community violence intervention types of programs do have very similar goals. They both want the violence to stop, be reduced. They go about it in very different ways, but they both have the same goal. And there's a role for both in a community. But it's very important as you're developing relationships that you ensure that you lay out what the boundaries are going to be. I'm not going to tell you, law enforcement, what I know about kids. Don't come and ask me for that information. And those boundaries that you have with law enforcement need to be explained to the youth and the young adults that you're working with, so they understand that they can trust you and you're not going to snitch on them with law enforcement. And somewhat lastly, we have familiarity with the community. So as I mentioned a couple slides back, the most successful staff that are part of these community violence intervention programs are going to be those that grew up and still live in the neighborhoods that we are targeting to bring about peace. But ultimately, staff need to be familiar with the community, its challenges, and who the youth are in the community. And I don't mean that vaguely. I mean that they would actually be able to say, oh, I know so-and-so, he's going down the wrong path. Or I know so-and-so's already involved in some gang activities. So I've spent a little bit of time talking about credibility with youth and families and how important it is. I want to just take a couple minutes to talk about credibility as your organization, not just the program within your organization, because you might have an organization that offers 5 different programs, but as your entire organization. Do you have the policies, practices in place to lend credibility to your organization? Do you, for example, have staff eligibility criteria? Kind of mentioned that a few slides back. An example, how long from incarceration release are you willing to accept in a staff person? Is it they got out 2 weeks ago, they want to do something positive in the community? Come on over, you can be a credible messenger. Or is it something like 2 years? And that's just one example of an eligibility criteria. Do you vet your staff? Meaning, do you vet them through law enforcement? Staff, you may not know every staff person that, or person who's interested in working for you, may not know them all. And so you may not know what law enforcement knows about these staff members. They're not going to tell you, but they might tell you, this is not a staff person that you would want to pursue for a program that requires credibility. And then have you vetted them with the streets? Do they really have that familiarity with the community? And is the community familiar with them? Do you have a hiring process? Do you have an application process? Do you have an interview process? Who's involved in the interviewing? Do you just do that yourself? Do you have other community leaders involved? Do you have law enforcement involved to help pick who are the most appropriate staff to be a part of these intervention programs? And then what types of training do you provide when you bring staff on board? We know that individuals with lived experience are invaluable in this work, but they might not have the training or professional development to do the administrative pieces of any of the roles that I talked about. Documenting their time, documenting what's going on with the youth that they are serving, making referrals, navigating the system of social service providers. So what kind of training or professional development are you offering your staff? And then also think about how you're managing your staff. Do you sit down with them regularly? Do you talk about cases or youth that they're working with? Do you help them learn more about how they might be able to connect with that youth, or how they might be able to provide a certain service for that youth? And all of these things under this organization column and the additional ones that I mentioned all help to build credibility for your organization that provides additional credibility for the staff that you have as part of your organization. So that is my presentation. And now I'm going to introduce our 2 panelists for the afternoon. And so if they could turn their cameras on and unmute themselves. We have John Fuqua with us, who's Director of Life Worth Living. And we have Pastor Rodney McIntosh, who is Director of the Violence Intervention Program, or VIP, in Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. So John is co-founder and executive director of an organization called Life Worth Living, which is in New Jersey. It's in my community. I know John very well. And this organization focuses on youth development and encourages young people to live long and fulfilling lives by providing educational and recreational opportunities. He's a former high school teacher that left the classroom in hopes of saving his nephew, who tragically lost his life to a gang-related crime. He's a community advocate, a coach, a father, uncle that believes in tough love, but understands the importance of listening to you. He also serves as a member of the Cumberland County Recreational Committee Board, and he chairs our Cumberland County Violence Reduction Work Group. John also, in his organization, was able to receive some funding from my office through a federal grant that we just ended, which was about preventing and reducing gang and gun violence, and to create a credible messenger program. So John runs a credible messenger program. And I'd like to think that because he received funding from our office, he was then able to parlay that into a much bigger grant from the New Jersey Attorney General's office to continue the credible messenger work. We also have here with us Pastor Rodney McIntosh. He's a native of Fort Worth, Texas. He's a pastor of Christ, the Risen King Church, where he has served in that capacity for the last 11 years. He's also the director, as I mentioned before, of VIP Fort Worth, which stands for Violence Intervention and Prevention. And that program's goal is to reduce cyclical and retaliatory gun violence in the city of Fort Worth. Before we move on to our questions, would either panelist like to add anything about themselves that I may have been amiss in mentioning? John, no. Rodney? No. Okay. So let's move on to some of our prepared panel questions. So we're going to start out with this first slide of questions, and we're going to give each panelist 2-3 minutes, and they both have so much to say. So don't be surprised if I'm like, all right, okay, let's move on to the next thing. 2-3 minutes to answer these 2 questions. So we want them each to describe the population of youth that they work with. And then we also want them to tell us from their experience, what is it that the youth that they work with are looking for in their relationships with them? And I'll start with John.
First and foremost, it's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak. The first question, describe the population of youth and whom you work with. The first thing I want to say, the youth that I work with, they're intelligent. They're high character young people. They're a little emotional. They're antsy. They want instant gratification. They're also looking for love. They're looking for structure. They're looking for guidance. Unfortunately, a lot of them come from homes that don't give them much of that. When we start talking about our community here in Cumberland County, especially the city of Bristol, in which we're a warehouse here, my community housed 40% of the state's inmates. We have a federal prison, county jail, 2 state prisons, and a halfway house. So 4 out of every 10 inmates in the state of New Jersey call Cumberland County home. That's a problem. Our kids are faced with a lot of gang activity here. We have a high poverty rate. We have high gang activity rate. Our numbers as far as high school graduation are good, but when it comes to secondary post-high school education, our numbers are low. We rank in the bottom in the country. Cumberland County is the second poorest county out of 21 counties in the state of New Jersey, and Bristol is the poorest city and the number 2 ranked poorest county in the state. So we have all of those things working in our favor to be the perfect petri tray for negative activity, i.e. gang activity, because like I tell everybody all the time, one of the things that our kids are at times, they're desperate. A desperate man or woman will do almost anything. And that's some of the things that we're facing. What are they looking for in their relationship with you as a staff, as a member of the community, as an advocate? They're looking for somebody they can talk to. They're looking for somebody they can trust. They're looking for somebody they can depend on. They're looking for somebody they can lean on. Because for a lot of them, they don't have it in their homes. I can speak on it as a 45-year-old man, because those were the things that were missing for me here in my city 30 years ago. Those things weren't in my home, but they were in my community through my coaches and through recreational programs. So those are my answers to the first 2 questions. Great, thank you. Pastor McIntosh.
I too, as well, would like to say thank you for this opportunity. Man, it definitely is an honor and a privilege to be able to share and speak to the work that we're doing in the city of Fort Worth. The population that of youth with whom we work, me and John have so many, similar things in common. Because of course, it's the same thing all over the country. We're dealing with young men, of course, high dropout rates. Fort Worth, Texas, definitely has a high volume gang activity, Crips and Bloods, a lot of new cliques, a lot of young men who are emotionally immature, who are broken, frustrated, looking for someone not only just to talk, as you said, but someone to listen, having a desire for relationship, looking for father figures, right? Or just male role models. Also young men who have leadership but need to know what, like how to use it, right? Need guidance, building up. Also, of course, a lot of them, man, if we're honest with ourselves, man, are caught up in not only gang activity, but dealing with drugs, drug usage. Like right now, man, that is a big thing in the city of Fort Worth, drug usage. A lot of young men are taking pharmaceutical drugs and mixing those with other things. So I think those are like the young men we deal with. Like you say, so much of it, man, I'll be reiterating so much of the things that John said. We also understand that a lot of them come from absentee homes, no father in the house. So a lot of them feel like they have to do what they're doing in order to provide for their family, their mother. Man, I know young men who literally dropped out of school or joined gangs just for the sake of the camaraderie and trying to provide for a mother when they really should be in school. They feel like they forced to become men before their age. And I think the young men who are dealing with what they're looking for in a relationship, and not too like John, one of the things that didn't share is I was in a gang at the age of 15, right? So I understand the mindset. And I think a lot of them are looking for consistency, right? They've had so many things promised to them, yet so many people come in their life, they're up for a moment and then they walk out. So a lot of these young men are looking for consistency, but I've also come to realize a lot of these young men are looking for affirmation. I've seen the power of being able to tell a young man you're proud of him, right? Because we may think they do, but they don't hear that a lot. To be able to tell a young man, great job, or just to let him know you love him, right? And you'll consistently be there in his life. So definitely, I believe affirmation. I definitely believe consistency. And actually, John said this, before as well, structure and stability. Like, man, you'd be surprised how some of these young men desire structure. We think they don't. But man, I've dealt with some young men that once, they need somebody just to help them get to that place and to be able to take that structure and apply it to their day-to-day life and then them see the fruits or the benefits of it. So I think those are my answers to your first two questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, now we would like our panelists to talk about how credibility, not of their own organizations, but of their partner organizations, so those that they try to work with to bring about services and changes in the youth, young adults that they're working with. How does the credibility of them affect your work with the youth, families, and communities? And how does it affect your relationship with the particular youth that you're working with? I'll start with Pastor McIntosh this time.
So the credibility of other partner organizations is very important. And one of the main reasons being that we've noticed, come in contact with her is, man, the young men that we deal with are already fragile, right? They've already been mishandled in life. Again, like you said, they had people come and go. So all it takes maybe months to years to like build up this relationship. When we're talking about this credibility, to get them to a place to where they trust you and they believe in you and they believe in the work that you're doing in their life. But all it takes is a moment of sending them to the wrong organization, right? The wrong social worker, the wrong partner, and they mishandling them or treating them in the wrong manner, not understanding the fragility of, their psyche, and probably dealing with them different, because we have to be honest, like these young men are not going to all come and be well-rounded. So a lot of times they're going in to deal with other organizations, and they may not talk the way you want them to, may not look the way you want them to when they come. And man, to send them to somebody who don't have a full understanding of that can be detrimental to your relationship, right? To where it breaks the trust that you have with that young man. So man, you definitely have to vet the organizations that you're dealing with, know who it is, and it's good to a lot of times, and I even said a lot of times, I think we think like the bigger the organization, the better they may be when it comes to sending them. But I've even come to realize, man, some of the smaller organizations are more apt at being able to deal with these young men, right? And if they're smaller, it opens up the door for you to have this opportunity to have real dialogue with them and build this relationship with them. So that, and that's what we talk about, vetting our employees, right? But vetting the organization, like literally spending time with them and getting to know, again, who you're dealing with. Because like I say, man, to send a youth or a young man that it may have took you a year to get him to open up to you, all it takes is a moment of sending them to the wrong place, to where not only does he shut down on them, man, but he shuts down on you. And now you got to rebuild that relationship again.
I think Brother Robbie right on point with this one. Credibility is important. And Tracy, you can attest to this. One of the things that I firmly believe in here at Life Worth Living, we have 2 hashtags. One is hashtag we better together, because I want to work with everybody. We don't do everything. At the end of the day, we only can do so much. And we don't want our staff burnt out either. We also want our young people to understand the importance of being able to navigate a system with real concrete structured support. And that support is just not going to come from one organization. As soon as you think you're the only thing that's a problem, it's time to get rid of you. We don't want to come up with the God complex, like we're the end of all beings for this young man or this young lady. If we start doing that, then we're already out of sorts. But at the end of the day, collaborating with the wrong companies can also damage your relationships, because unfortunately everybody don't believe in the reimagining justice model. You have some people that's stuck in their old ways. A lot of us I'm a mom and pop organization. I'm a ground roots organization. My boots are still on the ground. And like my good brother Rodney just said, we kind of new to this. We've been in, as far as my company, we've been around for 2 years. I'm going up against organizations that have been getting funded for youth programming for the last 20 years in my county. And my approach is not everyone's cup of tea. Again, everybody don't believe in the reimagining justice model, so they're going to put resistance up. But I'm a firm believer in continuing to be persistent, because that's what we're teaching our kids. This is the way that our world is going. We're going in a new direction, so we have to find a way to work together. First thing that I do with those organizations, we have the honest and uncomfortable conversation. Let's find out where you are, and let's meet each other in the middle of the road and see if we can work on that relationship or get you up to where you need to be as far as capacity and understanding to work with these youth in a way that's going to help them become better people and better citizens in our cities and in our county and in our state. And that's the goal. So at the end of the day, we have to be dogged in our approach. We also have to be patient. We also have to be understanding, because for a long time, we was operating in that vacuum of violate, lock up, violate, lock up. But now we're talking about talk to them, build them up, talk about what went wrong, how we can change it so the approach is different. And then some of us were dealing with folks that went to college in a different generation. I still got people in my county that graduated from college in the 1980s. I graduated from college in the 2000s. So all of our approaches are different. And a lot of these models are different as well. So we have to be understanding of that. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. But one of the things I don't want to harp on, I don't want us to keep talking about what used to be. We have to start talking about what's now. Our kids, our community, it's the urgency of now. Dr. Martin Luther King wrote about that, and we need to be able to move on that. We get the proper training, I think, which is a very important. Tracy alluded to that in a couple of her slides. We need to know what's going on in our community. It's going to be some of us that are excellent on the keyboard and excellent in the boardroom and putting programs together. But we also have to collaborate with those people that have the skills to go out in the community and actually execute the plan. So it has to be a partnership. I can't feel a certain way because this organization is only good at putting together the proposal, and we're good at actually going out in the community. That's why it's a partnership. We all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses. So what we shouldn't do is point the finger at each other and say, what you're doing wrong. But let's talk about what we're doing right as a collective, and then talk about how we build on that as well. One of the things I love to do more than anything is talk about where we're shortcoming, but my shortcomings in my company. We talk about what we're not doing right. So with that lens, there's other people with the understanding that I'm looking at my own insecurities, and I want you to be able to do the same thing so we can build this thing. Rome wasn't built overnight. We're not going to change the system overnight. A lot of these programs and opportunities are new, and we need to look at them as such. I just think relationships have to be honest. We're not all going to get along at all times. If all of us get along all the time, something wrong. We're going to be able to agree to disagree, and that's the same thing that we filter down to our youth.
So in some of your comments, John, you talked about, not everyone is on the same page in terms of reimagining justice. And we have a question from the audience that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to answer it for myself, and then you guys can jump in, because I definitely know Pastor McIntosh will have something to say on this. And it's basically, can you share strategies that have been successful in gaining judicial systems, or judges and prosecutors, to buy into these kinds of programs? So instead of what has always been happening. So I can say for our community in southern New Jersey, we have been working on doing some things differently with juveniles since 2009. So this didn't happen overnight by any stretch of the imagination. We began a collective impact coalition model in 2009 that had everybody around the table who has a stake in seeing you succeed. And that includes judges and prosecutors and police departments. And we have done small things that have had pretty great results, like the reduction in juvenile arrests that Nina mentioned during my bio, to bring about starting to change people's minds and thinking. And when I was at Rutgers University, and we were contracted to do this work in Southern New Jersey. And so as a research institute, we were able to collect and present data. So everybody was on the same playing field. I'm a strong believer in data. So data doesn't lie. It might not be full data because people aren't collecting what they need to be collected, but data doesn't lie, and it's not anecdotal. And so you can easily shut down certain conversations or guide them in a different way when you have the data to show, hey, 75% of our kids are getting rearrested. Something's not working. Let's talk about that. And also, we do have a very, well, I would like to say progressive prosecutor. I don't think she likes that word used about her, but I would say if you put her up against, a majority of prosecutors across the country, she is more progressive, and she definitely wants to move dollars and focus from the end part, incarceration, to preventing those problems from ever beginning in the first place, whether it's mental health counseling or drug and alcohol services, how kids are treated in school districts. And specific for Credible Messenger program, which is the program that we funded John's organization to do, and John can attest to this, it took, I don't know, a year at least. No, it probably took more than that. 3 years of me literally just continuing to bring this idea to the prosecutor, continuing to bring the idea, just continuing to educate her and provide evidence that this is working in other places, and this is what we can do here. And then when she finally said, yes, let's try it, John's organization and my organization, we spent months and months and months and months planning and designing the Credible Messenger program before he ever got $1 from us. So that's just our story. John, Pastor McIntosh, you want to add? I know you had talked when we practiced about your relationship with law enforcement. So not everybody has bought that pill or swallowed that pill of reimagining justice.
Okay, yeah, and it is. So, and I just say strategy wise. So when we first sat down and started VIP, I definitely knew like that we had to have the buy-in, right, of the district attorney. And the reason I needed it, which may not be everybody's approach, was I understand some of these young men that we're dealing with, they gonna still yet be offenders. They're gonna do some kind of crimes. They're gonna do something. So my goal was to see if we could get her like those who are maybe in this life that we're working with, man, and we see them progression, that they done something that was, man, what we would consider minor, right? To be able to give us the opportunity to bring those young men back into society and continue to work with them. So my strategy to get her to buy in to VIP literally from the beginning was to literally invite her to the original meetings, right? So that she felt as if she had a part. I mean, like from the very, we've been up now since like, I think 2019, we kind of started the discussions. And of course, 2020, we kind of started rolling and COVID hit. But out from the onset, right? And our DA is not progressive. Like anybody, if you come to Fort Worth and you say our DA name, she used to be a judge, and everybody like, Lily, man, she the worst. But because we build this relationship initially and this consistent contact and bringing her to the table and asking her, what does she think about this? And this is our goal. This is what we're trying to do, showing her the steps like to rehabilitate these young men. I was sitting in the meeting one day and she was kind of the place like, no, I won't do it. And then I shared a story with her. Cause I'm gonna be honest, man, definitely, the leaders won't date her. But it's something about a real life story when you can give it, how it impacts them. And in this meeting, she's telling us that, no, we're not doing this. My office is not doing this. But through the constant relationship and me reaching out, being intentional about showing her where VIP is heading and giving her stories and talking about young men who is impacted, man, we got to this place to where she's like, okay, Pastor Mac, I tell you what, whenever it comes to that place, and if it's a young man and you think that y'all can rehabilitate him, I can say that we can probably do 10 to 15 in Europe. Well, that's not a lot to some people, but it was to me, just to get her to buy in to VIP, knowing who she was. And that just happened because I was consistent in bringing her to the table and allowing her to see the work. But on the other hand, when you're talking about, and I know so many organizations, and I've seen so many different people on, VIP Fort Worth has faced two different reactions when it comes to the police, right? So for me, the higher leadership, the chief, some of the command staff, some of the deputy chiefs, like those people have bought into the work, right? The chief is one of honestly in this city, man, the chief is probably one of our greatest advocates, right? He meant the consistent collaboration and even just conversations between us and him. But the reality of the matter is that we also have to face is everybody, even if the leadership has bought into it, everybody's not going to buy into like this new way of dealing with violence intervention or this new way of doing this new way of doing this work. So we've had moments to where I've seen the chief literally tell people that this is what I need for you to do for VIP. But because they don't believe in the work all the way, they would rather be subordinate and not even do what's asked of them than to buy into the work. So, there are different strategies. But the one thing that I've made sure that I've continually done and been consistent at is continually meeting with, different people in leadership, right? And letting them see the program. But here's the reality. Here's this thing that we face with, and you said it earlier, allowing them to see the work, but making sure that they understand that I'll never be able to share with them information that can lead to somebody being incarcerated, right? Making sure that they understand you'll never get a name from me. I don't even let everybody on our staff talk to them, right? So it's like the only person that has a conversation with law enforcement from VIP Fort Worth is me. But yet I still make sure that I keep that relationship, right? And I continue to work at it and continue to build on it because I understand we have to be able to collaborate and do this together.
Thank you, Pastor. I just want to reiterate what you said because it was so spot on that you were intentional in building relationships with those necessary to change the system. And you were consistent and you kept bringing them to the table, even though you kept getting, nope, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. So that is definitely a crucial strategy. John, what do you want to add?
I just want to say, I love the fact that Ronnie touched on the idea of being consistent, consistent and persistent in his quest to get that credibility and that relationship built with law enforcement. We went through the same thing here at Cumberland County. I'm not a former gang member, but my entire family is. I come from one of the most heinous gang families in the county. But I've always was the guy in my family that the community protected because everyone saw something in me that was different. And that's my credibility. And I've always went against the power structures of the negative power groups. And I stood on that since I was a high school student. So I've always been respected in that sense. But to get our prosecutor and our law enforcement to buy into what I was doing, I started off with recreation because my town is divided by north side, south side. And when I came back home from college, I came back with the idea of creating a recreational program that would infuse our neighborhood with fun. I've seen too many people with angry faces. So the idea was put them on basketball teams, and I had Crips playing with Bloods, Nietas, Latin Kings. I had guys that were beefing with each other playing ball together for an hour, and it would turn into, instead of me shooting him, I ain't gonna pull my gun out on him because I just threw him an alley-oop in the game. That's my power forward. I'm the point guard. So we started working. I modeled that for about 5 years. And when I realized we started reducing violence in our city, and we started to get a buy-in from our prosecutor's office. Me and Tracy started working together a couple of years ago, and we have been sitting down continually doing the work. We've been modeling it in our schools. We were modeling it in our recreational programs. And so before we got the Credible Messenger grant, we was able to put life skill programs based on gang prevention and intervention in 4 of our local high schools. So we were building a track record that I could go back to the prosecutor's office. I could go back to Tracy and say, look, this is what we're doing right now, and it's working. Now we come together as a joint effort between us and the rest of our county. Make a real headway when it comes to dealing with these issues in our community. So there's something to say about being persistent. There's something to say about connectivity. There's a lot to say about not giving up, because everyone's not going to say no right away. Again, we're changing systems that have been in place for hundreds of years. So we have to do the work, and we have to show, improve, and we have to be credible in our messaging. We have to be credible in our actions. And that's what we're going to hang our hat on. So when Brother Roddy proved that, then he's going to get the support of his attorney general. And that's just the way this shit's going to be.
So John, you did mention something that has come up as a question, which is your quote unquote, for lack of a more eloquent way of saying it, non-lived experience. You were not a gang member. You have not been incarcerated, but you do have a lot of experiences that make you credible in the community. But we did get a question. So what are lessons from credible messengers or other staff, you guys, on approaches that are used by individuals who have lived experience that can be applied to practitioners who have non-lived experiences? John, I'm going to start with you on that one.
I think we're going to touch on this a couple of times. I think the first and most important thing is to be honest, be credible. You want to talk about a good judge of character? Our youth. Youth can smell fakeness from a mile away. They'll detect that you're there because you're getting paid 30 seconds into the conversation. They'll detect that you're real 30 seconds into the conversation. So one of the things that I've always done, I've always approached them with the same concept. But look, my first question has always been, how can I help you? What are you going through right now? I do not have the answers because I don't even know what you're going through. We have to look at life for what it is. My life is my life. I tell the youth all the time, you get to where you are in life in 2 places, what you do and what you don't do. I'm here. I lived in the same neighborhood. I grew up in the projects. My mom was on crack. I got 4 sisters that 3 of them was pregnant before they was 15. My dad lived on the other side of town with a whole other family that he supported. He never supported me. I'm from the mud. I know what it's like. So let's go. Break it down from that sense, and then we go. The conversations never stop. Again, like you said at the beginning of the slides, Tracy, I make no promises, but I let our youth know from the rip, I'm going to be consistent. And I've been that for the last 20 years. So I've been dealing with 2 generations of young people where I've dealt with fathers, now I'm dealing with their sons. And we have the same relationship. And what people are going to say about me, no matter what, is John Fuqua has always been the same. He's always cared about us. He's always been fighting the fight for us, whether it's connecting us with jobs, whether it's connecting us with recreation, whether it's putting me in your car. I got 2 kids that want to argue all the time. I throw them in my car, show them the old school. Like I said at the beginning, I believe in tough love. I put them in the backseat of my car and take them to the woods. Y'all gonna fight it out before y'all go on the block, fight, shoot, kill, stab. Y'all gonna shoot the one and bring y'all back home. We're gonna end all this. So it works. These are approaches that we have been using for the last 20 years. And we're gonna continue to do that because at the end of the day, everybody got different life experience. And everybody's life is valuable. And everybody's story is valuable. I don't know if I'm gonna affect the kid the way Rodney is, and I don't know if Rodney's gonna affect the kid the way we are, but we have to give our kids different options. This is not a cookie cutter process. With one mold is not gonna fit every kid. That's one of the things that we have to understand. That's why you have to be like Bruce Lee, gotta be water. Gotta be able to move like water and never become form. Don't be stuck in one form. These things change all the time, just like we see the trends in gangs, even the way gangs dress. I remember at one time the Bloods and Crips was red and blue. Then they went to the team jerseys and things of that nature. Then they went to tips of the hair, different colors, just wearing belts. So we have to be moving, we have to change, but we have to be consistent in our message.
So Rodney, do you have anything to add to that in terms of advice you can give for those with non-lived experiences?
Yes, first of all, John, like you said to me, man, spot on. I love it. Because I definitely want, like, for sake of our audience and people that's listening, you don't have to been to prison, right, to reach our youth. You don't have to lived in the game to reach our youth. Like, does it help? Yes. But here's the reality. Most of the time when I'm first introduced, the young men don't know I've been in the game. Most people that know me around here know me as Pastor Max. So they think a pastor coming to talk to them, right? But the one thing that I do believe that helps, like if you never lived it, is being transparent. Because even though you've never been in the game, you've done something. Like if we're honest with ourselves, I don't care who you are, like on this call, as a young person growing up in society, you've done something in life. You've been around friends that done something in life. As John said, you've seen your family members, like when the crack era hit. I'm pretty sure if you're in the inner city, most of us had family members or somebody. Then you had the heroin and the meth. So all of us have seen like what drugs do. Like we've been around situations or circumstances, and you have to be transparent enough, right, to open yourself up. And it may not be your situation, but something, because there's always this trigger. Like John said, it wasn't him, but to be able to say I had a nephew that now this young man can open up, right? Like, so we have to be willing, because I think a lot of times what we feel as adults now is we're ashamed to let these young people know that we've lived through something. Like we come in with this perfect image, and and it's like he also just said something. The one thing the streets teach these kids is to be able to see real from fake, right? So we have to be willing to come in and be transparent. You have to be consistent. And man, I'm gonna show you something else, man. I think to get all of them. And I think in our practice we was talking about it. Be loving. Like come in literally, girl, who you are, man. When you come in loving and again willing to listen. Because I think another thing that we do is because we're, as we would say, the experts, we think that we have to come in giving information. When a lot of times the best thing we can do is allow them to give us information, and now the floodgates can open, right? And just having relationships with other people as well. Because that's another thing, building the proper relationships with people who may be close to the people that you're trying to deal with, so that they can vouch for you, even though you've never lived that experience. When another young person or somebody can say, man, sister so-and-so did this, or this brother did that, man, that changes your credibility even more than saying I've been to prison or I was in the game. When somebody that they look up to or somebody that they know can vouch for who you were or who you are, man, I think that does great, it does a great job when it comes to this work. But I definitely think consistency, love, man, and like I say, transparency, man, is definitely needed. Again, you don't have to been and done what I've done, but be willing to let them know you've done something.
Great points. I've never really thought about it that way. In terms of like, yeah, I got stories I can share. And you're right, the vouching. You pull through for a kid, you show them love, help them, and then they vouch for you with their friends. You're right, that is the gold standard of credibility. I'm going to go to the next slide. Actually, I'm going to skip the slide for a second. I'm going to go to this slide. So when credibility has been lost with a youth, how can it be fixed? John?
This will be just, again, going back to honesty. We got to let our young people know that this process ain't perfect. We got to know that we're not perfect. Sometimes things may be lost in translation, or sometimes some staff might make that mistake in making a promise, and we can't guarantee things. So it boils down to making sure that we're honest with our young people, letting them know that we're not God. We don't have the ability to change the world instantly. We don't have all the answers. And I think one of the biggest human things that we have to let them know, we got to show them our vulnerability and let them know that we're not perfect. A lot of us that do this work understand that, but I think some people coming into it new, you'd be so excited and you wish you think you're going to save everybody. I tell people all the time, we're not in the saving business. We're not going to save anyone. What we're going to do is give them the tools to make it in the world that they live in. And sometimes those tools may have a dysfunction. I bought a flashlight from Walmart at one time that didn't work. Now you going in the dark with it, you turn it on, the first thing you say, I got this flashlight from Mr. John. Then I got to tell you, my bad, the flashlight didn't work. But we just have to own it. When we make those mistakes, we have to own them. And those mistakes sometimes come when we do a warm handoff to another organization, promise that they're going to do counseling right away. We put the kid on the back burner now, 2 weeks later, he still hasn't had that appointment. Or even if you said something like, I can get you in a program tomorrow, come to find out, they don't got no more beds. So those things happen. And when you're dealing with human beings, a lot of people, and Rodney alluded to it earlier, a lot of our kids, their psyche is already fragile, and a lot of them have been disappointed before. So a lot of times, and I know I can say this for myself, a lot of times our young people who have been disappointed by adults in the past, they're already waiting on you to disappoint them. So when it happened, they're like, yeah, I knew it was going to happen. But what we have to do when we do make those mistakes, unlike the people that came before us, we have to own them.
Great. Pastor McIntosh?
I definitely would start with honesty. I think for me too, though, man, it's like being willing to hear them out, though, right? Because a lot of times, especially you talk about if we send them to another organization, or even if it's a promise, right, that you didn't keep, man, being willing to, because again, if we're in this work and depending on your demographics or your audience, man, I deal with young men from 11 to 29, right? So a lot of the younger people, they're so used to, when they talk to adults or they get them, man, you're gonna respect me or this and that. Let them know that you have a level of respect for them. Their opinion is valued, right? And let them know that like you understand the mistake was made, because that's what I love that John said, man. I always tell people, like, again, I was new to this work, like John said, like I've been doing it, but just in a structured way, it's new to me. So man, I'm honest with the young dudes to let them know, look, bro, Pastor Matt gonna make mistakes, man. Like I'm learning how to do this as I am going. So truth be told, everything I do is not gonna be perfect. But just as I'm willing to, like, man, give you this grace when you do things, when you told me, okay, man, I'm gonna go and get my ID, I'm gonna get my driver's license. I'm willing to give you the grace and we keep this relationship going. Be willing to give me that same grace when I make that mistake of handing you to the wrong person, right? Be willing to give me that same grace when, man, I may have told you something and something else come through and it don't, and it don't pan out. But definitely, I think for me, man, making sure that they understand like their words and their opinion have value, because I really believe, man, so many of our youth think everybody talk at them and nobody listens to them, right? And man, I'm telling you, man, when I tell you I just seen the value of literally just letting them talk and, man, you told me this and it didn't happen, I'm gonna let you get that frustration out, right? I'm gonna let you release that. And then I'm gonna make sure, again, that my word intentional. I'm intentional now, though, about making sure, bro, if you give me the grace to right this wrong, then I'll do it. If it's an organization, allowing them to know that, man, I'm not gonna just push this to the side. I'm gonna have that discussion with this other organization about the way they hurt you. I sent you there, man, because I had a trust with this organization and they broke that trust, right? To let them know that, man, like you mean so much to me that people that you may consider in a higher place than you, we definitely gonna have a relationship about the way they dealt with you, because I value my relationship with you more than I do that relationship with them. Because again, they're at a place in life where they consider themselves to be stable. My job is to get you to that place.
So we have kind of a whopper of a question from the audience. So I've kind of saved it for last. And it goes like this. How do you make gangs and the gang lifestyle not look enticing to our youth? Our youth see the money, the name brand shoes, the clothes, the gold chains, and of course they get those connections. They do not and they get the connections to other members in the gang that they don't get in their homes. And it can help to glamorize the gang lifestyle. Who wants to take that one first?
No, I jump.
Okay.
Just smiling, because no, that's because. So here's the truth. And again, now this is where my past may come in and help me. right? Because like we go to schools as a program and deal with some of the youth in the schools, like the young ones in the game. And I think where we failed, because of everything you just said, Ms. Tracy, all they see is what they will believe to be the good things that have to do with gangs, right? We don't see videos. You don't really see videos of people in prison for 20 years. You don't see videos, right, of the police coming to take everything that you work for, right, as you consider working for, you hustle for. So I remember I went to a school one time. I was dealing with this young kid that was in the gang, and I asked him a question just talking about it. Because, of course, we had to make sure that they know you got two avenues that lead to. Like, here's the truth. Like, this road, I tell young people all the time, nobody retires from gangs. Nobody retires from the drug life. You got two places you're gonna end up: prison or death. Like that's what else is guaranteed with it, and we don't show that. So I asked the young man one day, and again, you know, it's just different thing. I asked the young man who was in the gang, and I said, man, do you eat breakfast by 2, 3 in the morning? He was like, what? No, man, no, that ain't normal. I said, I know it's not, but that's what time they take you to breakfast. That's what time they take you to breakfast in prison. 3:30 in the morning, they waking you up for breakfast. That ain't normal, right? People are going to tell you where to go, when to go, how to move, when you can move. I make sure that I let them know, right, that the reality of the matter is this, that they may allow you to be in the gang, sell your drugs for 2 to 3 years, but the trade-off is not even. It's not a balanced scale, because you may be gone the next 20 to 30 years of your life, right? And so that's the first one. But then I also talk to a lot of young men, and I've been in this situation. I tell them, man, like whenever that court date come up, or whenever, you know, it gets serious, man, the same guy that tell you I'm gonna ride with you forever may be the same guy that'll turn you in, right? Like this will be the same guy that when you're at trial, man, nobody's there except for your mother and your family. Man, I just try to make sure that they understand what they believe is a family. Actually, it's not a family. Man, it is not love for somebody to know that you just came home from prison, and because you're in the gang, they turn around and give you a drug sack and say, man, I just want to make sure you back home. No, I'm going back to prison eventually. So I just try to give them the reality of like what gang life leads to, because I don't think we see enough pictures of it. What I really hate is music and you know, and social media have glamorized that part of life, not showing our youth the whole truth of it. And like I say, man, it does have two destinations. And I think, man, a lot of these young kids don't know it. And then they find themselves in the room with a police officer, and they don't know how, and something that they can't get themselves out of. So that would be, I guess, my simplest answer. But that's why I think John started laughing. Man, these kids are so drawn to it right now. Like the word, man, honestly, man, I won't say it's an impossible task, but that's why we signed up for the job. We do have a big job in front of us, but I also do believe, man, if we stay committed to it, that we can do it, man. And again, we have to be real with these young men and let them know where it leads to.
John, do you want to add anything to that?
Absolutely. I think Brother Rodney is spot on. I'll take it a step further. As a 45-year-old man, one of the things I tell the youth all the time, I grew up at an age where I was taught that going to the blueberry and cucumber field, we was taught you get paid for what you pick. I was 13 years old when I first got a first pair of rubber gloves and set out to the cucumber field. And I picked cucumbers from 6 a.m. to 12 noon. I was taught the value of $1. So one of the things that I started telling our young youth here is it's okay to work. I'll put up somebody's schedule for 8 hours a day, 35 hours a week at McDonald's, and I'll put the time that a drug dealer got to be on that block, and that person at McDonald's is going to make more money and be more effective in his time versus your time on that block. I do a lesson called Human Currency, where I talk to the kids about the amount of money you make ain't going to equal to the amount of time you're going to serve based on those dollars you make. So we break it down as to economics on a level that they understand. Another step that I do is myself, and I firmly believe all kings and queens wear crowns, and it ain't just drug dealers that can have nice stuff. I keep nice stuff. I tell my kids all the time, I grew up in the era in the projects where, I grew up in a community where all the drug dealers had the big cars, and I wanted one too. I said when I graduate from college and get my life in order, I was going to get me a Mercedes. And I got one because I worked. And I talked to the kids about that. I got a lot of guys that emulate the importance of work. I got a team that get on the internet every day and talk to the kids about working, whether they're working at a factory, whether they're a crossing guard, whether they're a trash man, they homeowners. So we started doing programs here where we teach the kids about being able to get the things that you want in the right way. I tell them all the time, there's nothing wrong with wanting nice things, but you have to earn them the right way. We don't want you on a block poisoning our community. I want you on a block with a broom sweeping that block, and you're gonna be a custodian, and you're gonna have an honest check. And at the end of the day, like Rodney said, there's only two places you're gonna end up, either dead or in jail. But I tell them all the time, if you're doing the right thing, you're doing things in the right way, the end of that rainbow is gonna be a pot of gold. Now, everybody pot of gold gonna be bigger, but it's different sizes. But you're gonna need to decide how you spend your gold. And that's one of the things where it comes into effect, that where we gotta teach our kids more about financial literacy. That's one of the things that we have to change as far as the narrative, because like Rodney alluded to, unfortunately, these record companies, they're going to allow our rappers and singers to go out giving out the false narratives. Just got done watching a group of kids in my program earlier today. We was watching a video for the young brother from Memphis, Tennessee, where he talk about the 100 shop. They standing in front of the corner store with $5 million cars parked out there. And I'm going, what's wrong with this video? Everybody in that neighborhood not going to be able to afford no $1 million car. That's not realistic. We all not going to be able to afford the Gucci and all those labels. That's not realistic. What are you going to have to do to obtain those things? And we break it down. That boy outfit, the outfit that he got on costs more than a monthly mortgage. So we have to be smarter. And at the end of the day, it's about educating our kids. And unfortunately, Rodney, you know, that ain't what the country music guys are selling. That's not what the pop artists are selling. But that's what our rap guys are selling. That's the biggest form of music right now and the most influential music on the planet. So we up against a lot, but we got to be dogged in our approach, and we got to continue to reroute our kids. And it's something that we have to do every day. And I challenge everyday guys and women who aren't selling drugs, who aren't gangbanging, that's doing well for themselves, to get out and talk to the kids about the success that they have obtained, and don't be afraid to talk about that success.
So in 30 seconds or less, if you each could kind of address any recommendations that you would have or experiences that you've had with building credibility, because you use individuals, or you are an individual with lived experience, meaning you've been incarcerated or part of a gang life, and how that may have impacted your credibility with other partner organizations, including law enforcement. 30 seconds or less. John.
I'll go first. 30 seconds, ready, go. I reluctantly decided that I was going to hire people for life worth living, an incredible message. I wanted everybody to be independent contractors, because I wasn't trying to deal with guys that may ruin their reputation by making bad choices, because I live in a small town USA and I didn't want to blow back. One of the things I ended up experiencing this summer, I hired a couple guys to come rock with us, and right away they had their own vision. They were still banging. They had their own view of what life worth living and what our credible messenger program needed to be. We had to divorce those guys. It was tough, but it was something that needed to do, because the program and the principles that I stand on, it took me too many years to build it, and I wasn't going to let two people make a couple bad choices in a matter of weeks and months to destroy everything that we built.
Thank you, Pastor Matt.
So first of all, Miss Tracy, I didn't really catch the question.
So how have you had any experiences where the fact that you have lived experience, or any other people part of your organization has lived experience, and how that may have impacted how others have seen your program and whether it's credible or not?
Okay, yes, I actually have had to deal with couple instances. So first of all, as far as the community part, just them seeing incredible, man, I too, like Jim, man, I had to make sure I just hired the right guys, and not only being able to hire the right guys, and I know there are people who do this work that you've had to deal with the snitch jacket, they're working for the police, like all these different things. So I was intentional about getting people who like were so solid in their community that where even if that came out, people just knew, man, like this dude just did 20-some years. If he didn't do it then, he wouldn't do it back. He didn't do it back then, he wouldn't do it now. So it just brought validity to the program, because literally for the last year, we had people that was just saying stuff about VIP. They this. Well, we got a guy who came home, man, and I'm being honest, he probably been home maybe 6 months, right? Had literally helped probably start half of the Crip gangs in the city of Fort Worth. He's part of our team, right? Because overnight, he brought validity to this program, unlike anybody else that could. I then turned around and went and got like one of the guys that, and again, when I was in the gang, I was a blood. I went and got one of my associates or my friend who had one of the biggest names in the city of Fort Worth, right? And literally, man, and this is the thing, and I want to make sure I put this out. I told him a year to 2 years ago, get yourself together. I want to give you a job. Because I understood he was still around it. And I needed him to understand, man, I need you to start transitioning. And if you'll start transitioning, I have some. So once we put these two, when everybody know they were enemies, they used to be rivals, we get these two big name gang members and put them with this program. Overnight, the people that were saying, man, they snitches, they this and that, the whole conversation changes, right? But then I also would say this, like far as also the impact too. But I also, the way I had to keep credibility is I had somebody who got a charge, right? And like, man, right now we did it, and like we're dealing with it, you know, man, and everything in him said he has not done it. We have teachers, people that know him, like, man, that just wasn't him. But to show like how serious I was about making sure that we're credible and that we don't allow, you know, like you was talking earlier, to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, I had to let him go. As much as that broke my heart, I was like, man, I got to let you go, Jay. Man, such and such, such and such. If it's paying out that you didn't do it, I bring you back. But I wanted people to know that, man, I'm serious not only about you know, changing people's lives, but also about the people that's doing the work of changing lives. And then I yield.
Great, thank you. So we are coming up to the end of our time. And so again, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds. If there's anything else that you want to throw out to our audience to consider, I'll give you each 30 seconds for closeout comments. John, I'll go to you first.
I just want to say, continue to do the work, guys. This isn't easy work. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. There's no template. There's really no blueprint. We have to evolve daily. The world is often changing. Prices of gas going up every day. So the cost of living is going up every day. And I know how hard it is to get up and do this work every day. Just do your best. Make sure you find some me time. Self-care is very important. Find time to take a break and re-energize and stay fresh for the work. Burnout is real. You won't help anybody if you flame out. So get some rest.
Thank you, John. And closing comments, Pastor Mac?
Yes, I first would like to just say to everyone, man, like, thank you. I'm thankful for being on this call, but thank you all for the work you do. And just know, man, we're part of a national family. That, man, you know, if you have people doing this work in other places, man, be willing to reach out. Because again, there's no one on this call that has all the answers. But I've, man, been with Advanced Peace and different organizations. And I realize this is a movement, right, man, to save our youth and to save our young children. And, man, let's all see each other as a network and as a family. And secondly, and I'm finished, make sure you understand, man, that this is not a job, it's a calling.
Yes.
And when you see this as a calling, and now I'm just saying as a pastor, the reason I couldn't quit pastoring when I wanted to, because I saw it as a calling. And my calling is always bigger than me. Know that, man, this is a calling that you have, man, to keep up the great work, keep fighting. And like Brother John said, make sure you get self-care and take care of yourself. God bless.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everyone for attending as well, and hope that you found this educational as well as inspiring. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sterling.
Thank you, everyone. I really want to thank our moderator and panelists for such a great discussion, as well as the audience for really engaging in the discussion and sharing some great questions. You know, we got to hear a lot of powerful insights from the individuals doing this work right now, and I think they provided a lot of practical guidance on credibility in this field that anyone in the audience can walk away with or share with their partners that are doing this work right now. So if you have any remaining questions or anything along those lines, please feel free to send those to the National Gang Center and reach out via email or at our website. We look forward to continuing this type of important discussion on youth violence intervention in future virtual opportunities where we engage other experts like youth and families. As these learning opportunities arise through the National Gang Center, we will notify everyone that has joined us today via email.